Whenever I go on a trip, like you, I use the Maps app on my phone. And there's an important little blue dot on the screen, and it shows exactly where I am. Now, it often gets overlooked as you and I are more focused on getting to the final destination, but that blue dot is just as important as the final destination. See, for the app to direct me to where I want to get to, the final destination, first has to know where you're at. In today's panel discussion, Road Trip, a journey through the current state of First and L's children's ministry, we're going to focus on that little blue dot of the children's ministry here at First and L.R. And the goal is for the children's ministry and its leaders to grow. In order to do that, we must reflect, we must reflect on the past and the present to understand what's working, what's not working, and why. Paul taught the church in Corinth to reflect as he discussed the mistakes of the past. He said, these things happened to them as examples and were written down as warning for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come. Not everything in the past is a mistake, but the progress for the future is made by remembering what has been done before. My name is Tyler Loy, and this panel discussion is part of my doctoral portfolio at Liberty University. The problem I seek to address with this panel discussion is that First Assembly of God North Little Rock lacks a practical training program for its children's pastors. Today's panel will aim to identify the successes, failures, and the missed opportunities of the children's ministry at First NLR by looking at the past and at the present. I'm joined today by 4 panelists who will aid me in our discussion. First, Dr. Rod Loy, who is the lead pastor at First NLR. He started his pastoral career as a children's pastor, and his continued love for children's ministry is evidenced by his loud voice, advocating for it to be seen as a ministry that must be prioritized. Dr. Randy Jumper is a professor at AGTS and leads the Ministry Training Center at First Assembly of God North Little Rock, which prepares prospective pastors with training and schooling in partnership with Evangel University. Pastor Brian Dollar, a prominent voice in the children's ministry world, is the founder of the High Voltage Kids Ministry curriculum and continually leads and teaches and trains children pastors around the nation.
So you're the prominent person.
Prominent.
Yeah.
I'm the least. What I mean, yes. What are we? What are we? Are we?
Okay, can I finish the introductions here?
Prominent.
I'm like,
I'm already hurt.
Pastor Brian also served as children's pastor for 17 years at First NLR, and he was my children's pastor.
Prominently.
Finally, Pastor Sophia Weeks, my partner in leading children's ministry at First NLR. She officially became a pastor 4 months ago. She grew up in our children's ministry. I was her kids' pastor. She'll graduate from Evangel University in 1 month. Now, today's discussion will be between the 4 panelists with me on stage. There will not be a dedicated Q&A time, and I know you'll have questions. I encourage you to interact with one another after the discussions, talk through the lessons you've learned and the insights you've gained. And if you'd like to ask a question of myself or one of the panelists, you can email tloy@firstnlr.com, and we will follow up with you on your questions. So let's begin our journey by understanding where the children's ministry is and it has been. So, Pastor Brian, what aspects of the ministry currently function with consistency and excellence?
Certainly something that we've been doing for quite a long time as a church and as it relates to children's ministry is having a whole family approach to ministry and specifically our teaching and having the family on a learning journey together. We don't rely on prepackaged content that we get from outside the church. We actually develop our own material in-house, and it coincides directly with what the adults are learning. So on any given weekend, the kids are learning the exact principles and Bible passages that their parents are.
Which facilitates spiritual conversations in the home.
And really, that intentional alignment brings about yes, those conversations at home, but also it allows for the content to extend way beyond whenever we initially share it. And so it becomes something they discuss during the week, in the car, throughout the experience that a kid has, even at school. So that alignment really makes that whole family learning journey, not just something that is siloed in separate ministries where the kids are learning one thing and the adults are learning another.
Yeah, so Dr. Jumper, your girls came up in this, what we've developed as a learning journey for a family together. How did that help you as a parent to spiritually guide your kids that also were in our church and in our children's ministry? And
I think that is the strength of the system, is that it helps the parent. I think that actually becomes the main value in doing the curriculum, in my opinion, is it facilitates the locus of discipleship into the family union, and it creates tools for a parent, a caregiver, to be able to interact on things of spirituality. That is its primary value.
And don't you think it also puts, traditionally it's like you teach our kids spiritual stuff, and then we'll be happy. And don't you think it puts a little more pressure on the parent that you got to be involved in the spiritual journey?
Yeah, it's probably a bigger all question. We got a long panel to stay today, and that's different points that along the way we'll probably hit this. But that concept of the locus of discipleship and evangelism in a child's life, where does that belong? Does that belong with the parent? Does that belong with a pastor? Does that belong with peer groups? And the answer is yes. In fact, I think as these pendulum swings throughout history, I think right now in our culture, we have swung the pendulum to the church's responsibility, and we're swinging it back. Some way, somehow, we've got to find a middle way, because the challenge with relocating in today's culture, spirituality and discipleship inside the family unit, is the family unit is completely unprepared at this point in our context to make healthy disciples. So it's a both and. So that giving them assets, tools, resources completely facilitates that.
And that's actually one of the things that I think we are doing well, in that we are consistently looking for ways to put tools in the hands of parents to be the primary spiritual leader in their home.
so let me ask this. Does it break down ever, though? So, Pastor,
All the time.
Well,
Because there's knucklehead parents.
well, yes, but also does the system that we've developed of the family being on a learning together break down? So when you want to talk about topics that parents don't want you to discuss in children's ministry, how do you navigate that?
There's a few times where we can't be on the same journey. So like currently, I'm doing a 3-week series on David and Bathsheba and sexual sin. Probably
not something kids.
Probably not my first grade or second grade granddaughter that I want her learning about sexual sin. So there are probably twice a year we diverge because we're dealing with something that is just not age level appropriate.
Okay.
But I don't know that that's breaking down as much as it's acknowledging that there's the different grade levels of learning along the way.
And since you're talking too, and you have a different perspective than us as the lead pastor of the church, what do you feel is currently functioning with consistency and excellence in children's ministry?
I think one of the best things is the methods of learning through repetition. So obviously I'm in the sanctuary, I'm not in there very often, but my granddaughter is, and so I get it reflected from her. And so every week there's what's the big idea, and the students learn, the children learn the big idea of that. And they probably say that 10, 12 times over the course of the day. And I ask her at lunch, what was the big idea? And she always knows. And her latest thing is that every Sunday at lunch, she wants to tell us the Bible story from that day. Well, you're communicating that truth and telling that story on a typical Sunday morning, 4, 5, 6, 8 different ways.
Yeah.
And that coming at it from the different angles and the repetition is really effective. And you know, whether it's a video, a character, a puppet, a something that you respond, a question and a response, whether it's the song. So all the different ways of teaching the same truth, you kind of, they don't know that you're teaching them the same
Yeah.
thing 12 different times, but I think that works very, very
I agree.
well.
All right, well, let's change gears a little bit. So, Pastor Sophia, where do you see the challenges in our current system? What's not working right?
So, on a positive note, I think we have incredible volunteers and workers that help us every week. And at times, I feel like we can spread them a little thin. And so we have so many things going on every morning. We have service at the same time. We have small groups at the same time. We have another group of children somewhere else. And so at times, I feel like they can be spread so thin that they don't get to connect one-on-one for a long period of time with
So
the same students.
are you saying that we give them too many opportunities within the church, or are you saying that we utilize the same volunteers too much?
Utilize the same volunteers within the kids ministry
Okay.
too much. So there are a few volunteers that help with checkout or help in service, but then we also pull them to help watch in the play area. And so they do have opportunity to connect in the play area with kids while they're not in service, but then we have to pull them out of the play area to go to service. And so yes, you're hitting all of the areas, you're reaching all the kids, but it's not a long period of time where you can build deep connection and relationship with them.
And that challenge is beautifully actually presenting itself out of a good thing, and that we're
Yeah.
growing very rapidly.
Right.
And the faster you grow, the harder it is to recruit, train, and implement
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
volunteer system. And so that's a tension that never goes away,
Yeah.
especially in children's ministry. You're always
Yeah.
looking to recruit, and the growth that you're having right now is phenomenal, and I think that you have to be more intentional to be able to fill those roles and not have people constantly moving between areas.
So, Pastor Rod,
Right.
what else do you see as a challenge currently?
You know, so in our particular situation, the check-in, check-out, security, the building, we have some structural challenges. So we're currently starting the project to build a new lobby just for kids ministry. But I don't think that's unique to our church. As I talk to other pastors, they're all wrestling with the security issues and the facility issues and how those play into security. That is a constantly evolving challenge for the church. I was at a church a couple weeks ago where I was able to walk all the way into a nursery room without ever being stopped. So there was never a security stop. There was never anything. I'm standing in the room with 2-year-olds before anyone ever said, "Can I help
And they didn't
you?"
know you were the guest speaker.
They didn't
just
know I
thought
was
you
the
were a
guest
random
speaker.
guy.
I'm randomly roaming through the kids area.
Wow.
And so but as I talk to pastors, that is a continual challenge for everyone. That's not unique to us. And as threats evolve and ways of dealing with them evolve, we have to constantly be changing.
That plays into actually the next question, because the world is changing. So, Dr. Jumper, what internal or external factors do you think are most significantly shaping the children's ministry at First NLR?
And so I want to make sure I'm answering you right, because there's two ways to answer that question. You're talking specifically at First Assembly versus the greater all culture, because I think we're talking about
Yeah.
that later.
Yeah, and I think external factors as
Right.
well that have played a part, like I would say, school shootings, the increases that plays a part. That's a very nation-wide, church-wide thing that I think has affected us.
Sure. So I acknowledge up front that I'm not in the children's ministry area. So that's an asterisk that's important to remember. I'm speaking to you as a parent, and even a parent who hasn't had a kid in children's ministry in 5
Yeah.
to 6 years. So I don't have, I have observations and questions, not thus saith Randy.
Yeah.
So first, I think the most significant internal factor in our children's ministry is that 2 of the top level leaders were children's pastors. You've got to buy into the fact.
And those 2
that-
leaders are Pastor
Yes.
Rod and Pastor Brian.
So when I say this, I believe that you guys are completely even unaware of how much impact that has on what you do, which is an internal opportunity, but it also could be an internal trap. Because we have such great consistency over time that children's ministry has to become very good at outside voices to come at it. So I want to just push a little bit on the curriculum, same thing in the sanctuary, whatever. I wonder, not saying it is, that the repetition becomes good, but there is the idea that because another factor is we're getting less and less and less time with an individual child. So that number of hours in a week is less. And if our only real time is an hour and 15 minutes a week, and we bear some responsibility. The methodology that you use in your weekend experience, 4 weeks on one story, I would assume that does create some challenges to be able to know the whole story of Scripture. If they're not in a Sunday school class or a small group kind of thing, I wonder, is that creating a problem? I'll give you an example. I just, in my ministry training program, I do this every semester with new students. A couple years ago, our denomination put out some sample tests for credentials, basic Bible knowledge. My students failed it this time. When I say failed it, they failed it. Which means that for whatever season, their biblical literacy is so low. These are basic stories. So I say that's an interesting thing to process.
I think scope and sequence is a challenge, but at the same time, the bigger challenge to scope and sequence is you used to come to church every week. And so now between dual custody families, ball games, all those things, where you used to expect you could see a kid 44 weeks of the year, and now the faithful attender, you might see him 24 weeks of the year. So are we going to effectively navigate the scope and sequence of Scripture when we see you once every 3 weeks?
So, Pastor Sophia, first, how often?
very hard.
How often do you think you see the average kid? Give us a scope for that, and then second, are there any internal or external factors that you think are significantly shaping our children's ministry?
I would say to the first, probably once or twice a month max. Of course, there are the exceptions that are there every week, and we, of course, appreciate that. And we do get to pour into them more, and they do get to hear the whole story. And we're even doing a series this year of the epic Bible story. So we're hitting the mark of all of the stories throughout the Bible, as many as we can. And so those children get to experience the full thing, and they're here on Wednesday nights and going to classes and learning all different lessons. But the kid that comes once a month, it is obviously more challenging. And that's not, I don't think it's something we can necessarily handle because it's their parent or their guardian that's choosing to only bring them once a month. So I think the same thing that Dr. Jumper was talking about in not being able to cover all of the stories is a challenge for sure. And this is something that I've been working on in my mind, is teaching something in the main services on the weekend compared to teaching something in the small group services on the same weekend, or the small group setting on the same weekend. And it becomes challenging whenever they learn something so repetitive for an hour, and then they go to a small group and learn something completely different. Because that's what we're doing right now, is we have a different curriculum for our small group setting.
So, quick hit from everybody on the stage. Let's look at big issues within our nation, and just off the top of your head, what's the biggest thing that is influencing or shaping nationwide or even worldwide our children's ministry? Just one thing.
Dual custody families.
Dual custody families.
The increase of access through technology. in the
Access
lives
through
of kids.
technology.
Yeah, and at the same time, the decrease in the amount of time for each story. So now everything's short form.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't watch a 30-minute cartoon or show. You watch a 90-second YouTube video. So attention span.
Yeah.
Pastor Weeks.
I think lack of trust
Lack
on the
of
parents'
trust.
end.
I would call it the diversity of the child in your sanctuary. And I'm not just talking about ethnicity. I think I grew up in a children's church environment where even though we were a compact group, there was a lot of uniformity. We're experiencing this in educational theory right now. So that a second grade teacher may have 9 to 10 different levels of ability to teach
Yeah.
in the exact same classroom. So I think the external factor impacting you is you no longer have a uniform target.
Yeah. That's good. Well, sorry to speak to the age of two of the members that were my children's pastors on the stage, but
So how do y'all feel about it? Back when
I apologize, but you both, Pastor Rod, or Dr. Rod, and Pastor Brian, you were both my kids' pastors at one point and have significant experience in children's ministry. So over the course of your ministry journey, how much has the children's ministry structure changed over that time?
Let's go back and forth. You say one, I'll say one, you say one, I'll say one. We'll see when we run out.
Well, you know, I will say on a positive note, one of the things now that is different than in the past is I am very impressed by the philosophy of leadership development that
good.
is there now to raise up leaders.
Yeah.
Even they're targeted at fourth and fifth grade. We see God using them, and you're intentionally pouring in them up until they end up becoming one of our kids' pastors. And I think that has made a significant change over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
I think one of the bigger shifts has been from, so when I was a kid in church, we were in the basement with an old lady with blue hair, and she was like, she loved us, but she was the loser of the volunteer sweepstakes. She got the kids. Changing from that to now where we have paid children's pastors who are experts. That is a very significant shift in the landscape of kids ministry, and our educational systems haven't caught up with the needs for those kids.
And the tools that we use today are significantly different than what we had when I first started out.
So I was in our kids' room the other day. There's now lasers.
Massive screens with the latest technology on the fastest computers you can imagine.
Moving lights,
Yeah.
where
Animatronics in different stages.
and you probably remember too, felt board.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was this green, or eventually it moved to blue felt, and then you stuck these little
Chalk drawings were a big thing. back in
chalk
the day.
drawings were big. But the consistency in that, the way we tell stories is different.
Yeah.
But the consistency is, it's storytelling. I mean, you might be storytelling with a felt board, I might be storytelling with a hologram, but we're telling stories.
And today, it's much more an immersive experience when we tell the story. Because
Yeah.
rather than just putting something on a board, we have sound effects, we bring the lights down, we set the music underneath it to fit the tone of the story. I mean, everything is immersive and interactive in nature.
So,
It's
Dr. Jumper.
And I'm sorry, but I got
Well,
another thing to
no.
say.
I'm sorry, but
Don't you think also
Hey.
kids ministry wasn't seen as like the most important area, and now it's moved from low priority to high priority. If you don't
It
have
drives the growth of the church now.
it is the driver.
Yeah.
Now, but here's the question, and that's where I was going to Dr. Jumper on this, is in your experience, is this consistent across the board? Or is this just unique to us? Do other children's ministries, and you're the leader of the campuses at First and LR, would you say our campuses have the same experience as our children's ministry?
I think first the answer to that is no. When I say that, edutainment has always been a part of what we do. Like, the education, entertainment has always been, because that's what
Yeah.
you're describing. It's just us old people's threshold of what was entertaining was lower.
You're right.
Because-
We had 4 TV
Yeah,
channels.
because the flannel graph was still cool. When I say that, you know what I mean? Like, so, again, we're all dating ourselves, but we watched Superbook and a big old hymnal dressed up in blue.
Salty
teaching us
the Psalm
songs.
Book,
What I'm
yes.
saying is iterations of those, because man, whoever that just disturbing. Anyone who would have been in that disturbing. But what the point is, it changes, it adapts over time, it does it. But here is the fundamental question, and it was one of my last external pressures. You talked about shootings and anxiety and all that. As this ministry grows under the hand of God and y'all's leadership, we always have to remember to resist the temptation. We are not structure builders. We are disciple makers.
It's good.
That is the piece. And the chasing structure, check-in and all that is absolutely fundamental and essential. But I would assume, just like me and my areas of responsibility, if you've got a 40-hour work week, and if you have to spend 35 hours of that 40-hour work week trying to figure out how do we process people, and then you don't sit down at the end of the time and say, hey, are we, as a 13-year-old graduating from our programs, a more effective follower of Jesus Christ before than the structures taking over? I think that's the challenge. And so to your question, I think I'm not confident that there's any lasers in any other campus than this one. And if lasers are the things that transform and change people's lives, which y'all don't believe it is, I know that.
Yeah.
But it goes a long way
But it's
towards
fun.
it. It's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
It captures attention.
And-
It agitates.
And that will-
Opens the door for life change.
Absolutely, and that
All
will
of
help
those
us.
are tools.
That will help us transition.
And we've always
kind of
had
to the next one.
tools,
I
but our
appreciate your
tools are
thoughts,
just
but-
changing over time.
Now, in conclusion, here's last question. Each of you answer. You have 15, 20 seconds. If you could change one thing about the current ministry model here at First and LR, what would it be? Pastor Sophia, what is it?
I think giving our leaders, empowering them,
It's good.
and helping them to feel as though they are just as important and necessary, because they are, as us.
Yeah. Dr. Jumper.
That's a hard question for me because I'm not in a day-to-day practice. So I'll yield my time to Dr. Lloyd because he'll need 30 seconds.
Dr. Lloyd. I've called him Dr. Rod, Pastor Rod, Dr. Lloyd. I also call him Dad, so we have a little bit of issue with the names here.
Yeah, and
You
it's
have an
why-
issue with your dad? Is that what I
It's
just
why,
said?
why you're not being able to control me on
Yeah,
this panel,
I
even
can
though
tell.
you're trying to be controlling.
I did not expect one of my panelists to be so argumentative, but
well, it's,
Well,
it's obviously necessary.
you've used 20 seconds of your 30.
I think we need to teach kids to question things and the right way to question things. I'm afraid we give them this is truth, and we're not engaging the discovery process of allowing them to discover that truth at
Yeah,
an early enough
that's good.
age. And so when they get to an older age where all of a sudden they have questions, I dealt with somebody yesterday, questions for them feel wrong. instead of part of the journey of becoming a
Good thought.
disciple.
Pastor Brian.
Which I would dovetail off of that, because I think if there's one thing we could change and or expand on is, I think we do the large group experience very, very well in teaching and immersing in Scripture. But if we could spend more intentionality and time in the small group opportunity to connect personally with the child and allow for those questions to be asked and processed from a biblical worldview, I think we need to move to smaller, more personal environments as much as possible, especially as we continue to grow.
It's really good. Thank you each for your thoughts on this. And thank you for joining us on this journey. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back and begin our next panel discussion. Thanks for being here with us for this first one.